I'm your host, Joseph Warji, and I would like to welcome you back to Sensical Intelligence, the podcast for all things sensible. This week, I would like to discuss the story of Tahj, but before we get into that, you can follow me on IG and Twitter at Life of Imla, subscribe to Sensical Intelligence, and follow Sensical Intelligence on TikTok. You can also stream Sensical Intelligence on Spotify and other platforms. Links in the bio or description below. When you're a misfit, people tend to look at you like you're a mistake and instantly count you out. It's something that no human should deal with, but it will always continue to happen. In society, we tend to cast people to the side because of their nature, but we rarely sit down and ask the question, why do they act like this? My senior year in high school, I met this young man who came from a difficult background. I believe he was a product of a single mother and his dad wasn't that involved, but I'm not 100% sure. However, I do know that he was placed in certain schools to keep him out of trouble. The kid had a good heart, but his head just wasn't in the right spots sometimes. I'd always see him act out outside of class just to be within the cool crowd, and sometimes he wouldn't even be in class. I just scratch my head sometimes, and just ask myself like, what is this guy doing? He would just be like really just be wilding sometimes, jumping on people's backs, pranking people in the senior lounge when he should be in class, just wilding and really annoying people. So I'm curious one day and asked him what his grades are. He pulls out his phone. He's got all A's and B's. I'm thinking to myself, like, he just showed me he's smart, and he does work hard, but he just plays around a lot, plays around too much. He was also in the basketball program, and he made the JV and freshman team that year. He was obviously a good player for his height, as he was on the shorter side. But the one thing that stood out the most was he played with a lot of confidence, and he really worked hard. Nobody believed in him more than he did, and he just went out there and proved it every single day. Every shot, he just took it with confidence, and he just thought it was going in. And as soon as the team scored, as soon as his team scored, he was just hounding the other team's point guard full court. I'm like, I like that. And he didn't even know, but I was his biggest fan. Team meat rider all day, that's me. But there was a problem. He wasn't getting enough time on JV. He'd play a couple quarters, but not the full game. And if I remember correctly, you could only play about 5 quarters in a day in Jersey. And to manage them properly, they would just split them up between the two levels of freshman and JV, or like JV and varsity. The freshman team, they may have needed the help, but that was the explanation as to why he was getting the time he was getting and not what he was supposed to. I really didn't think much of it at the time. It's like I just really thought he just had to pay his dues and like work his way up. But as the season progressed, I got to know the kid and began to understand why he was the way he was. One day he was on the bus to a game and he didn't have a seat. So he sat with me. He was hungry because I don't think he got something to eat after school. So I gave him an extra sandwich that I had from lunch, as I always would pack extras just for me or just in case someone else needed one. But I didn't really think much when I gave him the sandwich, but we got to talking and I learned a lot about him, honestly. And I learned the reason he came to the school was so he could play basketball and so his mom could keep him out of trouble. because he'd have a tendency to get into it with some people, and he would always be in the middle of the commotion. As I began to understand him, I began to realize he's really not a menace to society, just a misunderstood kid. So that got me thinking, I gotta watch over him a little bit, like a big brother does to his little brother, to keep him out of trouble. When he was out of class, like he usually was, I'd tell him to get back to class. But, he'd do his own thing. And sometimes the classes were kind of pointless. And he already had the grades. So I was like, you can't force people to do something they don't want to do. Plus, he already knows what he's doing. So eventually, it came to a point where in the basketball program, he was just fed up. Because of the situation with him not progressing in the program, although he was playing well consistently. On one of his last days, I talked to him and he was talking about leaving. I tried to talk him out of it so he could just stay out of trouble, because it was a better environment than what he was used to. But he explained that he knew his worth and he didn't want to become a shelf player over the years. So he eventually went up to the coach and told him how he felt, and you just couldn't help but respect it. He left on his own terms and went back to his hometown high school to go prove a point. Whether he proved that point or not, he bet on himself, and you have to admire that. And after that encounter, we keep in touch every so often, but life goes on, and if you don't see a person every day, you forget about them. It happens. All in all, the point of the episode is to not overlook people, because you don't know what they may be going through, or you don't know what shaped them into them. The best thing to do is to understand them and not judge. I'm your host, Joseph Wergy, and I'd like to thank you for tuning in to this episode of Sensical Intelligence. Again, follow me on all social media platforms and stream Sensical Intelligence on Spotify and other platforms. Remember, stay sensible. I'm out.